We have Jen, David, and Tom have joined us online. Tom, I'm not sure if we've met before, but I'll invite you on screen after my talk. This is, I don't know what week it is. It's in the middle of our yearly Truth of Happiness Dhamma study. The Truth of Happiness is one of my books on Buddhism. That's a companion study to a larger volume called Becoming Buddha, Becoming Awakened. And it's written as a 10-week study of to integrate the Buddha's teachings as a foundation for our Dhamma practice. And in going through this course, we realize or we learn what the Buddha taught. And as importantly, we learn what the Buddha didn't teach, where he spent nearly as much time teaching what his Dhamma wasn't as he taught that it was, because it's such an important thing. We cannot develop, or the Buddha realized that a mind rooted in ignorance is so prone to continue to ignore its own ignorance that it will grasp at anything to ignore even the Buddha's Dhamma. So he upon his awakening, he thought seriously for 2 weeks if he could teach this, what he now understood, in a way that would pierce that veil of ignorance that is so common to every human being. And this isn't a basic general type of ignorance. The Buddha's not saying, and I'm not saying that simply because we're human beings, we're ignorant. What the Buddha realized and what his Dhamma teaches is that we're ignorant of something very specific, ignorant of Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths define the entire Buddhist teaching. He never taught anything outside of the context of Four Noble Truths or dependent origination. A mind that's rooted in ignorance is constantly prone to distraction through something called I-making or self-identification. I won't get too deep into that because we cover that in weeks 6 and 7, maybe 8 also. That mind that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths is prone to distraction, so he taught a meditation method for one reason, to deepen concentration. He did not teach meditation as a practice of visualization, as a practice of investigation or analysis. He didn't teach mindfulness meditation to be mindful of that you're thinking. He taught none of those things. He didn't teach, we're going to touch on that in just a few minutes. He didn't teach things like walking meditation that are so common today. He taught to be mindful of your breath in your body, not to be mindful of your feet. A natural consequence of a well-concentrated mind is mindfulness when you're doing anything at all, including walking. But to substitute a walking meditation practice for a concentration practice simply denigrates the Buddha's teaching and diminishes to the extent that it's not useful anymore. So we learned last week that the Buddha taught one single meditation method with a two-name title, Shamatha Vipassana. He taught Shamatha, which means tranquil or calm, as the method or the technique that we use, being mindful of the breath in the body to develop calm. A well-concentrated mind is a calm mind. It's not something that we grasp after. We're not trying to develop a calm mind or having calm experiences on our cushion. It's nice when they happen. We're trying to develop concentration. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that, and we learned this last week in the last few weeks, is that when we keep our meditation practice solely focused on deepening concentration and maintaining the method is what? Recognizing that you're caught up in your thinking, come back to the sensation of breathing. That relates directly to the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. Those two components are a meditation practice. It's not just being mindful of your breath. And I say that for a very specific reason, because we can get very frustrated if we think that we're only supposed to be mindful of our breath and never have a thought in meditation. We talked a little bit about this over the last few weeks. The Buddha didn't teach a meditation method to develop a trance-like state. I could teach you all in a few minutes a meditation that you'll all be in a trance. Why don't I do it? For one thing, it's such a huge distraction that a few of you might just decide to do that instead of this. It is. Even the idea that there's no such thing as a self, and this is a part of a Zen practice, that we should establish ourself in nothingness is kind of that idea, or emptiness. The Buddha never taught anything like that. The Buddha taught a meditation method, Shamatha Vipassana meditation, to deepen our concentration, to support insight, Vipassana. It's very, in a very significant way. It's not some generalized insight either. In other words, he didn't teach a meditation practice, as is often taught, to simply be mindful of what's occurring, what's arising and passing away in our thoughts, or to even focus on one thought and analyze that thought or get a feel for the thought. He taught to recognize thoughts and feelings arising and passing away. And so in the guided meditation that I give you, I include the instructions that we're going to touch on here, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. And just to go back, we went through that series of 7 suttas on jhana. The reason why I read all of those suttas and we looked at each and every one of them is to emphasize, again, the importance of developing jhana as a meditation practice that the Buddha taught. When the Buddha said, go meditate, he would say, go find the root of a tree or an empty hut, find a secluded, quiet space, and do jhana. That was how he described the meditation practice, doing jhana. And what does jhana mean? Jhana means concentration. So it means that we develop ever deepening levels of concentration. And from that well-concentrated mind, we're able to support the other themes or aspects of the Buddha's Dhamma. And that's what the Satipatthana Sutta is about. So I'm going to just review quickly what we covered, part of what we covered last week. The Satipatthana Sutta is the Buddha's teaching on what to do during meditation. That's the first part of the Satipatthana Sutta. And then the rest of the sutta is the Buddha's teachings on how to apply that ever-deepening, well-concentrated mind in a very specific way. And the reason why I'm saying that is much of these other themes that are included in the Satipatthana Sutta have now become their own meditation practice. In other words, we've taken something that the Buddha taught only to be mindful of, and we've made it a meditation practice, and you'll see what I mean. I'm beginning about halfway through what we covered last week, but I just want to use that to set the context, and I'll go through it quickly. The Buddha's words: remaining mindful of the breath in the body, mindful of the in-breath and the out-breath, the arising and passing away of phenomena with regard to the body. Again, a little bit of flowery language, but the Buddha is now teaching the first foundation of mindfulness that we all just did. Simply be mindful of the breath in the body. And as we become mindful of the breath in the body, remember the talks on jhana. The first jhana is simply taking pleasure or delight in this initial phase of meditation, in the seclusion, noticing that I am now secluded. That's what he's referring to here. We've disentangled ourselves from the world, even for just a few moments. And out of that seclusion is a feeling of delight. And it's important to mention that for 2 reasons. One is so we don't try to manufacture delight if it's not there. To recognize the delight that's born of a authentic Dhamma practice, the delight born of this first foundation of mindfulness. Seclusion, disentanglement from the world. And how do I do that? It's not enough to just sit quietly. And certainly if I'm sitting quietly and thinking about a candle or a deity or a topic, I can't recognize this first foundation of mindfulness, correct? My mind is somewhere else. I'm not in my body anymore. But if I'm using this pure sensation of being mindful of the breath in the body, my mind in that moment is united in my body, the whole purpose of the Buddha's teaching, and I can notice this pleasant abode of seclusion. That's the first foundation of mindfulness. And when we talked about these different jhana suttas, we all realized that, yes, we've all found this first level of jhana. There's nothing magical or mystical about it. It's just part of a right meditation practice. The Buddha continues. In this way, meaning recognizing that this is working, that your breath has brought you into your body right here, right now. In this way, one remains mindful internally and externally with regard to the body. Another important line. Remember when we went through I think it's the Anapada Sutta. We've gone through a lot of important ones lately, so I can't remember all the names. Where the Buddha talked about any fabricated thought is experienced both internally and externally. And then he said an internal reference or an external reference is just a reference. In relation to the form, he said internal form and external form is just form. It's an understanding that we have to understand the talks on jhana, that idea that in meditation we should try to establish ourselves in non-physical realms, such as the realm of nothingness or the realm of neither perception or non-perception or the realm of infinite consciousness. These are all part of the teachings during the Buddha's time and still taught in some Buddhist circles today, where the Buddha said those are simply fabricated mind states. Recognize the fabrication, whether it's internal or external. External would be an imaginary self-existence, or trying to establish myself in my imagination, such as in a future life or a future condition where I'm being rewarded for all the wonderful deeds I've done, or simply because I've done enough meditation that I get a reward out of that. That's a major school teaches that. It's none of those things, and those are all distractions. That's an external establishment. The Buddha is saying, don't do it. External, internal with regard to the body. With no self-reference, calmly noticing there is a body. The first foundation of mindfulness, being mindful of the breath in the body. And this will become a little bit more clear in a moment or two, when we're distracted by the things of the body, by feelings arising or thoughts arising, or both of them, we simply recognize that there is a body. Remember in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, the reason why that sutta is so important is the Buddha describes what a self is. And all this speculation about what is a self, or there's no such thing as a self, the Buddha answered that 2,600 years ago. He said that a self is made up, a person is made up of 6 properties: earth, wind, fire, liquid, space, and consciousness. Consciousness is not something that people would often think of as a property, and probably not space. But if there's no space, there's nothing defined. There's no mouth, there's no eyes, there's no ears, there's nothing. And consciousness is that 6th property because that's what animates it. It's when we get stuck in self-referential views, remember dependent origination, fabricated views, that consciousness now is an ongoing tool that we're using against ourselves to continue our own ignorance. But when we simply recognize that every person is made up of these 6 properties, there's no reason to personalize it, is there? Because there's nothing that we can personalize. It's 6 ordinary properties that are only made extraordinary when we come across the Dhamma. Why? Because then we can use these properties to awaken. Calmly noticing there is a body, remaining independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. I'm going to skip over some of my comments here. The Buddha continues, concentration is the foundation that supports refined mindfulness. Why would anybody want to create any other type of meditation practice when you read that from an awakened human being? Concentration is the foundation that supports refined mindfulness, the first foundation of mindfulness. Being mindful of what is occurring in relation to the Eightfold Path is refined mindfulness. So if we're ever confused about what mindfulness is, the refined mindfulness that the Buddha teaches is to hold. Mindfulness means to hold in mind or to recollect, to hold in mind the Eightfold Path. Being mindful of the breath in the body is the foundation of developing understanding of an ego personality and its relation to the distraction of stress. Clearly showing why we meditate and what the method is. Being mindful of the breath in the body interrupts outer focus clinging, conditioned thinking, and begins to quiet the mind with directed inner mindfulness. So we know on the series on jhana that the 2nd and 3rd jhana now start referencing directed thinking, meaning directed thinking in meditation is recognizing that I'm caught up in my thinking and directing my thoughts back to my breath. That's mentioned in the 2nd and 3rd jhana, and in the 3rd jhana, it fades away into that 4th jhana, simply meaning now I am just mindful of my breath. That's another talk. We're going to get into, at the end of this, I'm going to give a talk on the Anapanasati Sutta because it fits in nicely with this whole thing, but I think right now would be a distraction. And the reason why I say that is Anapanasati means breath awareness meditation, but it's not instruction for meditation. So when you hear people say, I'm going to go do Anapanasati, it's not something the Buddha ever taught. What the sutta, the Anapanasati Sutta teaches is the proper application of meditation using the examples of awakened monks. And so the Anapanasati Sutta is a description of, really a perfect description of how to apply meditation in the entire Eightfold Path to all of the Dhamma. The Satipatthana Sutta is a sutta for how to meditate, the method we use, and how to apply that concentration. If I can never get to it. Being mindful of the in-breath and the out-breath brings mindfulness to the arising and passing away of all phenomena. Again, every time we come back to the sensation of, to recognize that we're caught up in our thinking and come back to the sensation of breathing, we're interrupting ongoing conditioned thinking in a very simple, painless, and direct way. And that deepening concentration that we develop on our cushion can now be taken off our cushion and applied in our moment-to-moment life. Lorna was describing this beautifully early this morning, and I'm going to ask her to comment on it again, if you will, but not right now.
Oh, can't remember what it said.
Well, let me clarify what I said. The Buddha's Dhamma teaches us how to finally unite the mind and the body for the sole purpose of, not anything magical or mystical, for the sole purpose of living our life. And the only place our life occurs is in this present moment, but also framed by right view. Because if I haven't established right view, my mind will be too distracted to stay in my body, to be united in my body. A mind united in its body is a mind at peace. It's a mind well concentrated. It's a mind that needs that concentration to stay in this body through the framework of the Eightfold Path to see things clearly. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. So it's very simple and very direct. It's our minds prone towards distraction that provides a very useful vehicle for continuing ignorance. Another way of saying that is a mind rooted in ignorance requires distraction. The Buddha almost has correctly stated, but not quite, stating the first noble truth is there is distraction, as stating there is dukkha, because it is the preoccupation with dukkha, with always getting what makes me feel good and being very mindful of avoiding anything that might take away from that. That's the constant distraction from living in our body. Our minds are in the past or in the future, even within many spiritual practices. In fact, I would say most spiritual practices, because when there's a way of establishing yourself in a reward in the future for doing things right, or establishing a non-physical self in any type of realm, guess what? You're out of your body. And this is one of the things, it's one of the themes of the Satipatthana Sutta.
John, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The five clinging aggregates, form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, consciousness. The form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications are to be abandoned.
Yes, recognize and abandon.
Yeah. Surely consciousness can't be abandoned. It needs to change.
Yep, you have to remember, it's such an important question. Thank you for asking it. The reference to consciousness in the five clinging aggregates is that type of thinking that is rooted in ignorance, ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And a fully awakened human being is no longer fettered by the five clinging aggregates. In other words, it's not attached to form. It's not describing itself by its feelings and perceptions. So the thinking is pure. And so it's separated. We have to use words that we're giving that people can understand. So the content, I always say that the most important thing in the Buddhist Dhamma is understanding the context he means it in. Mm-hmm. So an awakened mind, obviously, is still I think the Siddhartha Gautama, upon his awakening, was the most brilliant thinker any human being ever was. And he continued that thinking. He didn't lose a way of thinking. What he abandoned was an ignorant way of thinking. And that's the only reference there. And it's important to bring that up. The five clinging aggregates are the Buddha's description. It's all it is. It's a grouping of five aggregates that describe the ongoing personal experience of suffering of a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths.
Discursive thinking.
Yes, like as the Buddha mentioned in the Gara Sutta, getting caught up in this feedback loop of self-referential views, thoughts, words, and ideas reverberating off of consciousness that is ignorant of the way things are. It has no way of seeing itself because it's ignorant. It's an ignorant view. I'm going to read this again. Being mindful of the in-breath and the out-breath brings mindfulness of the arising and passing away of all phenomena. The reason why I'm saying that again is there's a distracting movement about gaining insight into everything that's impermanent and that we should be mindful of that. That's not what happens. In our meditation method, when it's properly applied, being mindful of the arising and passing away of the breath in the body and using that mindfulness to cease being distracted by that ongoing train of consciousness rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, interrupts that process and it brings the mind back in the body. By noticing the arising and the passing away, the immediacy of that is experienced in noticing the in-breath and the out-breath. It's both the most practical example of understanding impermanence and the perfect metaphor for it too, isn't it? Being mindful of the arising and the passing away. And it's not just being mindful of the breath, then, is it? It's being mindful of the arising. You could say that that's the coming into existence and the passing away, the exhale. It completes the circle of understanding impermanence in a very direct way, rather than being worried about the impermanence of rocks or flowers or snakes or anything else, or myself. This is where we apply that impermanence. Notice that there is no specialness or applied emphasis attached to the normal breathing cycle. That's my comments. The reason why I'm saying that is we've also made meditation methods about manipulating the breath in all different ways and calling that mindfulness meditation. It may be, but it's not a meditation that the Buddha taught. Let me continue. Here the Buddha is talking about something I mentioned earlier. This is how we apply our concentration and our refined mindfulness. It's not a meditation practice. When walking, be mindful of walking. When standing, be mindful of standing. When sitting, be mindful of sitting. When lying down, be mindful of lying down. Again, it's not instruction to meditate in these different positions. It's simply be mindful of where you are. It's being mindful of having the breath in the body. There's nothing special about walking, lying down, sitting, or anything else, except that an awakened, fully mature human being is mindful that that's what they're doing. We're not doing something else. When going about, looking this way and that, be mindful. Be fully mindful. When bending or reaching, be fully mindful. When carrying a bowl or a cloak, be fully mindful. When eating, drinking, or savoring food, be fully mindful. When eliminating waste, be fully mindful. When walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, walking, talking, or silent, be fully mindful. He had many opportunities in this sutta and many others to say, when walking, meditate. When sitting, meditate. When laying down, meditate. When defecating, meditate. When doing this, meditate. He didn't say that, did he? Because he understood that a concentration practice requires a very specific practice. It requires finding a secluded spot, the root of a tree, and doing jhana. He did not say find a root of a tree, an empty hut, and go take a walk, or go lay down, or go to the bathroom, or go listen to music, or look at a flower, or listen to chanting. He said, go sit, find a root of a tree or an empty hut, and do jhana. And in that way, we deepen our concentration directly. The Buddha continues, in this way, one remains mindful of the breath in the body, the arising and the passing away of the body, independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. One of the most important lines in all of the Buddha's Dhamma. Independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. And he's teaching that in a meditation practice because he understands the distraction because of his own developing understanding. Remember, he studied with all the great meditation teachers of his time. He realized that they were teaching just distraction. Independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. That's what our meditation practice should be like. And anytime we adapt, accommodate, or embellish this simple shamatha vipassana meditation, we're clinging it to something of the world, in the world, and it's no longer independent, even if it makes us feel good. Just as a person with good eyesight, emptying a bag full of mixed grains would know, this is wheat, this is rice, these are beans, these are sesame seeds. In the same way, one remains mindful from the soles of the feet to the top of the head, encased in skin. There is hair, nails, teeth, tendon, bones, marrow, organs, feces, phlegm, blood, urine, sweat, fat, tears, saliva, mucus, and fluid in the joints. Again, the people have made meditations about all these things. They're called the meditation on eternal grounds. We should spend maybe a lifetime meditating on how a body rots after it dies. The Buddha is just saying, he's pointing out the ordinariness of life. And why would someone want to be so distracted or enamored with these things? It's just part of having a body. Come back to the sensation of breathing. In this way, the Buddha says, one is mindful of the four elements, the earth, the water, the fire, and the wind element relating to the properties. In this way, one remains mindful that this is all that I am. There's nothing special about this, except that I make it so. And in my making this special, these five clinging aggregates, I create my own confusion, deluded thinking, and my own suffering.
John, is it this is all that I am, or the body is made of this? There is a body.
I guess it really just depends on how the individual might look at that. So if there's a lot of self-attachment to this is what I am, you're better off looking at it without this self-identification. But it's describing the same thing. And you bring up another good point. One of the reasons why that Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta is so important is because it provides a context for that question. That's one of the reasons, or it is the reason why the Buddha taught it, because this idea, we have such a close identification with this self. This is what I am. And we have no perspective or context for anything other than this, that we cling tenaciously to this and nothing else. And so anything that would threaten that view, that ignorance, is something that we want to justifiably not look at. We want to continue our ignorance of it. So a simple teaching, like all that a person is constituted of is those four elements plus space and consciousness, is so resistant to that mind rooted in ignorance, because there's no self there, is there? But that's the essence of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's not, remember, he's not teaching there's no such thing as a self. He's teaching that self-identifying with impermanent phenomena is the problem. That's called I-making. And when we let go of all those views rooted in ignorance of what constitutes a self, what's left? Pure, bright awareness. Well, the thought would say, well, who and what is having that pure, bright awareness? And the Buddha would say, the question is that self is confusing you, because the question is insisting on a self-referential view. And yet and people have a hard time imagining, anybody would, especially when you're stuck in a self-referential view, how can I live my life without a self-reference? Well, the greatest example of that is Siddhartha Gautama did it for 45 years. It lived the most successful and important life any human being ever lived, without any self-reference rooted in ignorance. Sandy, excuse me.
Would you mind repeating the name of that sutta you were just referring to?
Oh, the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, DAHTU VIBBHANGA, I think. It's on the website. Yeah. Yeah, if you have any trouble, just send me an email. But it really is an important sutta. And again, just because we're having this conversation, again, thank you again for that question, Maura. This really gets to the heart of what the Buddha teaching. And I make reference to insight. Insight is very specific too. The three marks of existence: the impermanence of all things, the not self characteristic, and the resulting dukkha, or confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing disappointing experiences, because we don't understand the first two, impermanence and not self. So the Buddha taught that all things in the phenomenal world are impermanent, and most people understand that. But what we do, because we don't understand what constitutes a self, those six properties, we create self-identities to these things that are impermanent and insist that they stay permanent, and they're not, including, and most importantly, the thought constructs that we have about ourselves. So ultimately, an understanding of the three marks of existence gives us the release that Kandana had when he first heard the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Remember what Kandana said? Does anybody remember? All conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. The Buddha said, bingo.
You are now Anakandana.
Anakandana, you got it. What does he mean? I mean, that's a pretty simple and basic explanation. But what Kandana understood is that all conditioned things, all things that are impermanent in the world, including my attachment to those things, are temporary, and they're subject to cessation. And when like Lao Tzu said, when you understand the impermanence of all things, you'll let go of everything. It's just common sense. Why would I hold on to a view that I now finally understand is a wrong view? It's not who I am. And that view creates suffering for me. The Salatha Sutta. Recognize and abandon. The whole purpose of the Buddha's refined mindfulness is to recognize and abandon wrong views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Be mindful of the impermanence of the body to develop dispassion. If left unattended, a corpse decays quickly. It becomes bloated and infested. I won't go through the whole thing, but this is that meditation on charnel grounds that so many modern Buddhists are enamored with. And it's simply the Buddha teaching what happens to your body that you're so in love with in just a few minutes after it dies? It turns into this bloated mess. Again, the point isn't to even gross us out. It's to teach us reality. Why would I be so enamored with this at any point in my life, whether I'm 24 or 63? At some point, the cow's going to get this just like it got Bahia. And so what does that teach me in a broader context? It teaches me that I don't know when the end's coming. I better take to this Dhamma pretty seriously, because the cow might get me this afternoon.
And it might get you, and therefore also like recognizing that with anyone. I don't know, that's maybe a distracting thought, but
no,
but really it's like that when I recognize that about myself, I recognize that about the other people in my life or that I pass, and there's a tenderness that comes.
Yeah, it's important to know that we have one chance to do it. We don't know when that chance is going to come to an end. And there's other people in the world suffering too. And the sooner that I can get it. Notice the Buddha didn't teach anything until he awakened. He had great compassion. It was because of that great compassion for other people suffering that he went and started looking for an answer. But he didn't teach one thing until he knew the answer. And so that points to the importance of this. If I really care about other people, you hear me say it so often here that I hope it's not overlooked. I don't think it is. The most loving thing I can do for myself and for all other sentient beings is to first take to the Dhamma and awaken. Because only then can I help people cross the shore. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be compassionate and helpful and honest, etc., before we awaken. Certainly not that. But it means that if we really care about others, we should take care of ourselves first and awaken. Because then we can do something about that common condition, just like the Buddha did. And we talked a little bit about that earlier last week, and the teacher training is designed for that too. It's not just for people that want to teach here in this class. It's for people that just want to teach one-on-one other people. Understand that. So important. Okay. Lost my spot. Okay, I'm going to skip over this with the body. In this way, the Buddha's words, in this way, one remains mindful of the breath in the body, the in-breath and the out-breath. In this way, one remains mindful of the arising and the passing away of the body, independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. He repeats that. This is how one remains mindful of the breath in the body, not clinging. That last line is something good to remember when we're just starting our meditation. Become mindful of the breath in the body. And be mindful that now, for this period of time, you're not clinging to anything in the world, including your thoughts that are taking you back into your entanglements in the world. So you come back to the breath in the body as the Buddha teaches, and a moment later, you're caught up in your thoughts again. It's the perfect opportunity at that moment to deepen concentration, practice restraint, and come back to the sensation of breathing. That's a meditation method according to an awakened human being. Now, mindfulness of feelings. I'm going to go through this rather quickly because I don't want to come all the way back to this again next week. Mindfulness of feelings. So the first foundation of mindfulness is simply to be mindful of the breath in the body. The Buddha asks the rhetorical question, and how does one remain mindful of feelings in and of themselves, meaning to not embellish the feelings in any way, just feelings arising and passing away. When feeling pain, be mindful that there is pain. When feeling pleasure, be mindful that there is pleasure. When feeling neither pleasure nor pain, meaning ambivalence, be mindful that there is neither pleasure nor pain. The direct teachings are so simple and direct, it's hard to understand how people make meditation practices over finding a pain in their body and then maybe breathing into their pain as a way of alleviating the pain, or analyzing the pain in some other way. In meditation, in a concentration practice, it doesn't say we shouldn't do that outside of meditation. Some people find that helpful. It's not a meditation practice. That's all that I'm trying to say here and all the Buddha's teaching. So when we find pain in the body, we don't have to do anything except recognize that there's pain and come back to the sensation of breathing. We shouldn't label it, that's often taught too, label what's occurring. That's simply another distraction. And if we're labeling anything, I can only label it from a self-referential point of view, correct? It's just a distraction. Or analyze the pain or anything. The Buddha's teaching, Be mindful that there's pain. When there's pleasure, be mindful there's pleasure. Just as important, because we can chase a feeling in meditation too. Insist that my meditation should always make me feel blissful or wonderful, whatever we might describe. And that's just as much a distraction. If it's a pleasant abiding, such as recognizing that we're in that space of seclusion, simply recognize it. Come back to the sensation of breathing. When feeling the pain of the body, be mindful that there is pain of the body. When feeling pain of not of the body, or meaning a disturbance in the mind, be mindful that there is pain not of the body. Just to be mindful of it, not do anything with it, not analyze it, not massage it, not engage it. When feeling pleasure in the body, be mindful that there is pleasure in the body. When feeling pleasure not in the body, meaning an excitement in the mind, be mindful that there is pleasure not in the body. When feeling neither pleasure nor pain in the body, be mindful that there is neither pleasure nor pain. When feeling neither pleasure nor pain in the body, be mindful that there is neither pleasure nor pain. Not that there is neither pleasure nor pain not in the body. Be mindful of it. In this sense, mindfulness means to simply notice what's occurring. Not make anything special about it, not make a practice over it. Be mindful that there's neither pleasure nor pain. Come back to the sensation of breathing. In this way, one remains mindful of feelings and the arising and passing away of feelings, independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. In other words, independent of and not clinging to my feelings in any way that would insist that they be different than they are. They're simply feelings. And who and what is having the experience of feelings? 6 impersonal properties. Not me, because I'm concentrated. I've reclaimed my mind. I'm not stuck in mindlessness anymore. I know what's occurring. How do I know? Because I'm not taking it personal. I'm not taking even what's occurring in meditation, the arising and passing away of feelings and thoughts, in any way personal. I'm remaining well concentrated. I'm able to deepen my levels of jhana because I'm not personalizing my meditation practice in any way, just using mindfulness of the breath. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. And is it clear why I'm emphasizing that mindfulness of the breath? The Buddha gave us that great tool to use this simple and pure tool to avoid any distractions that he saw that were common during his time to so-called meditators practice. In this way, one remains mindful internally and externally with regard to feelings. And that's a reference to now we have united our mind and our body. There is nothing internal or external. This is how one remains mindful of feelings in and of themselves. The second foundation of mindfulness is to be mindful that feelings arise and pass away. Come back to the sensation of breathing. Mindfulness of thoughts. And how does one remain mindful of thoughts in and of themselves? When thoughts are passionate, be mindful that thoughts are passionate. The Buddha doesn't teach to label passionate thoughts. He doesn't teach to be mindful of them in a storybook kind of way, to just follow them around in our thoughts. Just be mindful. Come back to that first foundation of breathing. When thoughts are dispassionate, be mindful that thoughts are dispassionate. When there are thoughts of aversion, be mindful that there are thoughts of aversion. When thoughts are free of aversion, be mindful that thoughts are free of aversion. When thoughts are deluded, be mindful that thoughts are deluded. When thoughts are free of delusion, be mindful that thoughts are free of delusion. Excuse me. Again, notice that the Buddha is not teaching that we should start analyzing our thoughts to see if they are deluded. Simply recognize that they are and come back to the sensation of breathing. It's not the time for analysis. How does one know delusion? So this is how we cannot be distracted by wondering if I'm deluded or not. Thoughts and actions that contradict the Eightfold Path are a delusion. How does one know delusion? Thoughts and actions that contradict the Eightfold Path are deluded. Do we want to have a Dhamma practice that's not deluded? Do we know how to do it? Yeah, the Buddha gave us an Eightfold Path as a framework. When the mind is constricted, be mindful that the mind is constricted. When thoughts are scattered, be mindful that thoughts are scattered. When the mind is spacious, be mindful that the mind is spacious. And come back to the sensation of breathing. When thoughts are common, be mindful that thoughts are common. When thoughts are unsurpassed, be mindful that thoughts are unsurpassed. So when meditation, when you have that great aha moment, come back to the sensation of breathing. When the mind is not concentrated, be mindful that the mind is not concentrated. This goes into that underlying theme to know what the Dhamma is and what it's not. And in a very refined level, to understand when I'm not concentrated. And what do I do when I'm not concentrated? Go sit and meditate for a while. When the mind is not released, be mindful that the mind is not released. When the mind is released, be mindful that the mind is released. The Buddha refers to this often, that a mind that is awakened is a mind that knows that it's awakened. We have the experience. How do we know? Because it's not something ambiguous. It's not something that we're told that if we just do a certain thing, we'll find ourselves there in some future date. We'll know we're released because we'll have a calm and peaceful mind, but it has to be within the framework of the Eightfold Path. The Buddha just referred to that. Again, why? If the goal is just to have a calm mind, a mind that is well distracted is recognized within itself as calm, but it's only distracted. How does a mind know that it's calm and not distracted? By a concentration practice. And if the practice of concentration is not part of the Eightfold Path, it's very likely that your practice is going to incorporate something that will distract you to a calm state. Why was the Buddha teaching this 2,600 years ago? And here I'm teaching it 2,600 years later, because he experienced it directly. And he knows the ease that people fall into it because he experienced it. And now as a teacher, he sees it within his own students. And I've had the same experience. There was times, I don't want to I'm not even going to go there. In this way, one remains mindful internally and externally with regards to thoughts. This is the present quality of mind, or the fourth foundation of mindfulness. And how does one remain mindful of the present quality of mind in and of itself? One remains focused on the mind internally or externally on the mind itself. Excuse me. One remains focused on the origination of the mind and their arising and passing away with regard to the mind itself. Now, the Buddha is not teaching a creation myth that we're supposed to ponder, where does my mind come? In relation to the Dhamma and understanding the context, where is my mind arising in relation to dukkha, the first noble truth? That's all that I'm concerned about. It's important. There's so many suttas. There's a whole section on, I think it's called Teaching an Authentic Dhamma or something, about these great questions that would be put to the Buddha. And the Buddha would always say, disregard those questions. Those questions are distracting you. Come back to what's occurring right now. It's in that same vein that the Buddha is teaching this. The mind, a mind that is disturbed is a mind that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. The solution is not analysis of that mind. The solution isn't becoming ever distracted by the qualities of that mind. The solution is to develop an eightfold path and deep concentration to recognize and abandon the ignorance that's compulsively driving that mind to further ignorance. That's the whole point. It's the whole notion of becoming, why I call the book Becoming Buddha. And that in the independent origination, the eighth link is from clinging and maintaining, one becomes further, and the word further ignorant is left out, but that's the implication in the context. So we have to develop deep concentration to recognize and abandon when our own thoughts are distracting us down that road towards more ignorance. So let me go back to that once more. One remains focused on the origination of the mind and the arising and passing away with regard to the mind. So in the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, when I find that I'm distracted by a feeling arising, I've learned from the Buddha to simply recognize that I'm caught up in a feeling and come back to the sensation of breathing. Whether it's a feeling of pleasure or pain or ambivalence, doesn't matter. I don't have to analyze it. I don't have to label it. I simply come back to the sensation of breathing. And I do exactly the same thing with my thoughts. When I find that I'm caught up in my thinking again, I simply come back to the sensation of breathing. I don't beat myself up over being caught up in my thoughts. In fact, I feel pretty good about recognizing when I'm caught up in my thoughts because I know I'm doing a meditation method that an awakened human being taught, and I'm doing it correctly by coming back to the sensation of breathing. Jay.
Maybe a sidetrack, but I'm curious. A lot of concern for the mind, but we have our body integrated with our mind. Does he mention yoga, what we could consider yoga, because breathing and yoga are very important? Does he say anything about exercising the body or what you would want to pay attention to keep your body in good order and good shape?
No, he never mentions any any type of physical exercise, except remember that the monks and the nuns of the original sangha spent a lot of time exercising. Every day they walked into town and got their food. They took care of they didn't just lay under trees and get chubby. So there was no need to do those other exercises to stay healthy. They lived a fairly healthy lifestyle, meaning they only ate one bowl of food a day, and it usually wasn't something tainted like today's food. So and again, to answer your question, he never taught anything that might be called modern day yoga at all, ever. And he never taught any way to manipulate the breath except as you find your breath. And in this sutta, he teaches that if you find yourself breathing a shallow breath, breathe a shallow breath. If you find yourself with a deep breath, it doesn't matter. But he never taught to manipulate the breath in any way. Sandy, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was just thinking that by just bare noticing our feelings, thoughts, emotions, and going back to the breath, it's kind of deconditioning our habitual tendency to distraction.
Exactly.
And then once we do that continually, then automatically, just by default, dispassion is going to occur.
Yes.
You're not going to say, oh, I'm going to achieve dispassion. Just by doing that, we'll recognize, it just deconditions that habitual tendency.
Yeah.
And it just, you come back into the body and, just.
And then I think the body knows what to do.
Right.
There's a knowing.
It's like coming home.
Yes.
That knows, oh, now I need to move. It's a good time to move. Or like we can trust wisdom to direct us rather than our conditioned, impulsive, first out of the barrel, habits.
Yeah,
It's
you're
like a
absolutely.
distraction,
You're absolutely. That's the essence. That's why we do it, because that simple but powerful meditation method that the Buddha taught brings dispassion naturally. It's not something that we're practicing for. It's not something, that we hope to develop or that will be bestowed on us because we're great meditators. It's a direct experience of right meditation. And that's why the Buddha teaches it. And as soon as we think about what you just said is so profound, Sandy, as soon as we embellish that in any way, try to do something else, maybe in addition to or instead of, we've lost that simple, direct practice of creating dispassion by recognizing and abandoning self-referential views. And the wisdom that we develop, the great power that's in the Eightfold Path is in when the Eightfold Path is integrated. I shouldn't say about myself. Wisdom follows from having your behavior framed by the Eightfold Path. In other words, you don't have to think about it, about how your behavior is past a certain point, because you're always acting from ultimately the point of view of right view. You are harmless. You'll always be helpful in situations that you can be helpful, and you'll know when you won't be helpful, which is just as important.
I was referring back to Jay's comment about exercises in a sense too. Like once you're integrated body and mind, it's healthy in a sense. That could be a whole distracting thought, so I didn't want to get to that. Yeah. But that was my reference.
Yeah.
In that and it'll naturally be clear what's indicated.
Yeah, and a human being who has awakened is a fully mature human being. That human being will naturally know how to best take care of themselves. We don't need any outside agencies or spiritual disciplines to keep us healthy. We'll do it because we're awakened human beings. And maybe just to go a little bit further. I don't want to get off track. But the Buddha didn't teach those types of things. One knows there remain well, and one of the most remarkable things about really learning, I was saying to Lorna, I mean, I know this might sound a little crazy, but I think I feel like I know a human being who's known as the Buddha better than I know many human beings in my life, simply because I've studied his life so often. And it's remarkable how, I mean, I haven't read every one of his suttas, but literally thousands and thousands. And I've rewritten them in a way that makes relevance to dependent origination and Four Noble Truths. What is remarkable to me is that he never wasted a word, never wasted a moment. Everything that at least is recorded is in that context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths, and about uniting the mind and the body, about deepening jhana, and about seeing what actually constitutes a person in a dispassionate way. Everything. And it's remarkable in that. So let me, here we go. They remain independent of and not clinging to anything in the world. This is how one remains mindful of thoughts in and of themselves. So I went a little bit longer today than I didn't go as far as I wanted into the sutta because I talk so much, but it was a great conversation. That's the fourth foundation of mindfulness. So to simplify this, then we'll get into the application of mindfulness in the rest of the sutta. Let me a little preview of that. The next section is called Mindfulness of the Five Hindrances. So the Buddha first teaches us how to develop a meditation method for the sole purpose of deepening concentration. And from that well-concentrated mind, now we can hold in mind other themes of the Dhamma, such as the five hindrances. But again, notice, and you'll hear this again next week, the Buddha didn't teach to create a meditation practice about the five hindrances or a mindfulness practice. There's a very famous, one of the most famous mindfulness teachers around today has something called the five mindfulness practices. I think he might have expanded it to 7 or 14, but originally it relates to the hindrances. But the Buddha didn't teach a mindful practice of being mindful of the hindrances. He taught a meditation practice so that from a well-concentrated mind, we're not affected by the five hindrances. There's a big difference, isn't there? One is actually cultivating these hindrances, and one is recognizing them and simply putting them aside. So that's the application of right meditation. The Buddha teaches in the Four Foundations of Mindfulness to be mindful of the breath in the body. That's how we start our meditation practice. To be mindful of feelings arising and passing away and thoughts arising and passing away. It's also not necessarily in that order. Most of us, or oftentimes thoughts seem like they're driving feelings, and sometimes feelings give rise to a thought. Sometimes we can't separate the two, and that's called an emotion. An emotion is a feeling attached to a thought, isn't it? Usually a judgment. And then that fourth foundation of mindfulness is simply to be mindful of the present quality of mind. And that's the last instruction that I give on meditation. So I think you all see now the reason why I give the guided meditations as I do is they relate directly to the four foundations of mindfulness. And notice the present quality of your mind. And then what the Buddha's teaching is to be, that last instruction, is be at peace with that present quality of mind. Which to some seems a little bit crazy. Another way of saying it is to be at peace with less than peaceful mind states. And to most, that seems nuts, doesn't it? But that's the essence of the Buddha's teaching. If I have created dispassion with how I feel and how I think, even a feeling or a thought that is troublesome will not be affecting my thinking. I won't lose my mind over it. I'll stay concentrated while understanding that my mind is less peaceful. Lorna describes this beautifully well, I'm going to use this often, is that her mind is down here and mindfulness of her breath is up here, which is exactly how it should be. Again, we're not trying to develop a trance-like state. I used to say, I say it again because I said it last week, that the only way to develop a trance-like state is to cut off your head, and I don't recommend it. He always gets a little chuckle, even though I've said it 100 times.
What's the point of a trance-like state?
That's right. There's no usefulness at all. But a mind well concentrated is a mind that can develop insight into three marks of existence. That's the whole point of the Buddha's meditation. So that fourth foundation of mindfulness, if we can be mindful of the present quality of mind without the need for it to be any different, then we have united our mind and our body, at least for this moment. And in relation to noticing how in a feeling of anger then affects that feeling of anger. The second foundation of mindfulness affects that fourth foundation of quality of mind. Because if I react to the anger with more anger, at least now I can recognize, because of this practice, that the quality of my mind is anger. And I know why. Because I attach myself to it. Not because that so-and-so cut me off. That's not why I'm angry now. That happened yesterday or maybe 20 years ago. What's got me so angry now is I've attached myself to the feeling. Do you see the difference? Even though I want to blame that poor guy or somebody else for how I feel, the reason why I feel the way I feel right now is because I've attached myself to the feeling. And it is affecting that fourth foundation of mindfulness. Knowing that, again, this is a process that we can undo how we've lost our mind. In the moment I notice that I'm agitated, what should I do as a wise Dhamma practitioner? Understand the impermanence of it. Lorna was going to answer.
Just come back to your breath. Just say, abandon it, come back to your breath.
Yep.
It's not part of you.
Yep. In any situation, this is where that series on the wisdom of restraint was so useful. The Dhamma, where the Dhamma hits the road is right here. Contact with the outside world. When my senses are rooted in wisdom, contact with the outside world leaves my mind at calm and at peace no matter what's occurring, and I'm doing nothing to further my own ignorance and further suffering. If in contact with the outside world, my view is still rooted in ignorance, my mind is going to react, and that fourth foundation of mindfulness that hopefully I'll be able to notice is an agitated mind. But it's always at this point of contact that we practice the Dhamma. So if at this point of contact, I notice that there's something that is agitating me, taking me out of my body, even though the agitation has already occurred, I have enough concentration to recognize it and come back to the sensation of breathing and heal my mind in this moment. Sandy.
It's almost like you can reel yourself back in when you feel that proliferation occurring.
Yes.
You can notice it and come back to your body. It takes it back closer to contact and not further away out into mental proliferation, which is just going to compound it.
Yep. It's just more distraction. Thank you so much. And so anything that would lead to distraction in that moment is going to provide the opportunity for my mind to just get going and to stay agitated and go someplace else rather than be united in the body, including doing something that might have been taught as a meditation practice, but it really isn't, because it's just a distraction. Come back to the sensation of breathing. And again, to also see it in the right context. It's not just coming back to the sensation of breathing, because we understand the context is rooted in four foundations of mindfulness. And the way that I see what's occurring, I see it from the point of view of right view or developing right view. And a concentrated mind is so important to have that foundation, because if once a mind has reacted, it's lost its mind. It can get it back, but it's lost its mind. And again, so the four foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta, this is the beginning part of it.
Don't react to it.
Which is seen as
when it's lost, right?
Yes.
And when it's lost, notice it's lost. Don't react to it and say it shouldn't be lost. It's lost.
And this is all dispassionate. So when you find that you've lost your mind, don't beat yourself up over it, because that'll just promote more of a lost mind. Come back to the sensation of breathing. So okay, so next week we're going to get into the third talk on this and how to apply this concentration. Again, I keep saying that, but it's so important because this is so misunderstood. This is the Buddha's instruction on what to do during meditation. The rest of the Satipatthana Sutta is about how to apply it, just like the Anapanasati Sutta. So thank you for listening to this. Probably one more week, maybe two, but this is really an important sutta to really get into. Let me invite the folks online first. Jen, welcome.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I feel like we could, the more time we spend on the four foundations of mindfulness, I'm very happy to do that, because it really is the basis of the practice.
Yeah.
And this week there was one little excerpt from your book that I was focusing on, and it was being mindful of the breath takes you out of being externally focused and brings you into being internally focused. And that just somehow was sort of the theme for me for the week of remembering to be mindful of what is occurring within my body.
Yeah.
So that, you know, and that just leads to release from being distracted by dukkha.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
it.
all things external.
All
So-
things great.
So yeah, thank you.
Oh, you have something else?
Nope.
Well, I'm glad you could. How was you were able to see and hear me okay?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Glad you could join. David, good to see you. Oh, it's Mary. David's left. Hi, Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, John.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. It looks like David left, huh?
Well, he's sitting right next to me.
Oh, hi, David.
We were in two different rooms, so
Now you're in one room?
yeah.
Well, we missed you being here. But how was your talk today? How'd you take it?
Well, it's very beautiful because it is so simple. It's the basis and foundation of everything. And in our complex world, we can be distracted by other types of messages. And this is just very helpful and I guess foundational for me and for my practice. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. David, you got anything to say for yourself?
Oh, now he walked out of the room.
Camera
Okay.
shy.
Well, I'm glad you guys joined us today. Eva, good to see you this morning.
It's great to be here. Great to be with everyone. I'm fascinated by the way my distractions can be so creative and distracting me. You know, I'm brushing my teeth and I'm concentrating on brushing my teeth and trying to ignore everything else. And then I remember that the way I'm brushing my teeth is the way the dentist, hygienist taught me how to brush my teeth. And then, shoot, I'm gone. And I think I have, the five, well, I do have the 5 cleaning aggregates, of course, but I can work almost till 5. And then when I get to consciousness, I find that consciousness is something that I can't pinpoint as directly with. And then I find that to go back, it's all so confusing. I'll go back to the brushing my teeth, and then it's like, well, that's boring. I'd rather be thinking of what consciousness is and where it might lead me and so on. And so I'm in a quandary as to how to stay in awareness of what I'm doing and enjoy the fact of it and not want to make it better. Make it a little more exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's such a fundamental question, especially doing something as mundane as brushing your teeth or whatever it might be. How do I stay in this present moment? And if you ask the idea of getting stuck in consciousness, it's that it's a difference from that type of consciousness that's creating the boredom. A mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truth is that type of consciousness. That consciousness always needs something to self-establish itself. And there's not a lot of fun in establishing yourself at the end of a toothbrush. So we create other scenarios to distract ourselves rather than simply being present, but it's out of self-reference. So the difficulty is the consciousness that you're referring to is a consciousness that is stuck in that ignorant view. And so you see the feedback loop in that. That's why the Buddha taught us an 8-fold path. So you can see a situation like that. I'm brushing my teeth and I'm bored. So I'm thinking about something other than that, and simply recognize that that's the need for distraction. And in that moment, come back to the sensation of breathing and finish brushing your teeth. And the difficulty in even that is that it's entirely unfulfilling to do that. And now what's it doing for me right now? Well, it's bringing you awakening. And so we want to, one of the reasons why the Mahasangikas established a contradictory modern Buddhist practice 300 years after the Buddha passed is just that. It wasn't distracting enough. It didn't allow for something to take my self-reference out of this moment. It is such an important question. But also I would say that just the fact that you recognize that you're doing that is a profound change. Thank you, Eva. Lorna, good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Good to be here. Well, really, just to follow on what everybody else has said, that you know, to catch your thoughts when you go off on the story on a train, and catch it and just come back to your breath. Catch it, abandon it, come back to your breath, and just do it very gently to yourself. It's the practice. That's what we should be doing throughout our day. We all know we are going to get distracted for this reason, or brushing your teeth or whatever. And when it happens, it happens. Just abandon it, come back to your breath. Yeah. I'm also beginning to see that the more you understand that the body, your thoughts, your feelings are not part of yourself, the more you're not as intrigued by them, or you're not chasing them all the time, you know, and it gets easier to abandon a story that you're going off at, you know, a mental fabrication. Yeah. It gets easier because you realize it's just like, oh, you know, it's just, your mind just wanders and it's just gone down that you know, that tube again, and just come back to your breath. And it gets easier and easier because the basic understanding of your thoughts, you realize that it's just a thought. Yeah. It's not actual life or reality. It's just your mind on a thought. Yeah. So it gets easier to abandon. That's what I find.
Thank you. It's easier because there's a greatly diminished self-identification left. And that's the only way. The only way we can let go of something is to realize it's valueless. And we can only do that through the Eightfold Path. And that's what you recognize. So it's not like I'm giving up something or you're giving up anything of any value. It's simply a hindrance. It's a fetter. So let's get rid of it. And that's why the translated word that many people object to, even in here, is abandon. Because it is, that's the most direct word. We're abandoning that which we know is hurtful to us. It's just self-reference. So thank you. Anthony, good to see you.
So thanks for the talk, John. It was a great talk. I took great care to listen to you to make sure that you didn't trash mindfulness, which you didn't.
I didn't.
Because as you know, I went through the training to be a mindfulness teacher.
I have great respect for mindfulness-based stress reduction.
But I do have, I mean, I think it can coexist in some way. And I understand what you're saying, that the Buddha didn't teach anything other than the breathing part of it. But I find that if I have a body sensation that's aggravating me, if I meditate on that sensation, I can make it dissolve. And it doesn't always work going back to the breath. So if I can use a technique that gets me back to the breath quicker, where I don't have to get up and shake myself off, isn't that okay to use?
Yes, I would say it's okay to use, but I think it can get a little sticky in keeping that, in recognizing that's not part of Dhamma practice. Anything that helps you meditate, I guess, but it kind of goes to Jay's question. Often it's taught that yoga was taught to help people and get stretched out. There's no foundation for that. Maybe it's true, or maybe it does help. But so then we can, and it often happens that we substitute postures that are somehow associated with awakened states, that if we do the posture, we'll get to that state. And again, I'm getting a little bit off track of what you're saying, but then we're substituting something that's not what the Buddha taught as a meditation practice. But there's nothing wrong with doing it in meditation, and certainly to use a practice such as sitting, being mindful of your breath, and doing what you can to help alleviate pain. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to.
It's just how you categorize it in your own thinking, really.
I always try to go back to the breath, but sometimes it doesn't go away and it gets worse, and then it's interesting because that's to me what proves that mindfulness works, because when I actually meditate on it, it goes away where it wouldn't on its own.
Here's an interesting thing, and I don't mean to, because it's personal, and I don't want this to sound like I'm arguing with you. I just thought about it just now, and I don't want to go too long. I have some conditions that have me in constant pain, physical pain, sometimes really awful. As soon as I meditate, it's not there. But oftentimes, as soon as I stop and get off my cushion, there it is again. So, and I'm not doing anything else but this method, and I don't even think about it. In fact, I don't think, man, this is really hurting. Let me go meditate for a few minutes. But as a consequence of meditation, immediately, I think I gotta start meditating more. But but there's the answer.
Yeah,
So
I don't know.
So
it doesn't work for me, but
yeah, I
it
think
works for you.
I think that if personally, as an individual, if you find that it helps you, your concentration practice, that's fine. But as a teacher, my caution is to make sure you don't misconstrue one thing for another. That's all.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Lisa, good to see you.
Good to see you too, John. Good to be here too with everybody. I always like going back to the beginning and learning again about being on the cushion, meditating. I just remember way back because I've been meditating for many years and have learned lots of different techniques. I feel that they're compatible. I think that's what you were saying to Anthony, that I mean, as long as we are paying attention to the breath and going back and doing that kind of meditation, it's still okay to do other kinds. Because as if they're helpful, why not?
Well, here's what I would say about that. And again, we're all free to have any kind of practice we want. What I found to be most beneficial for myself and for many people that I've taught is doing what an awakened human being taught and not do anything else, because often the anything else proves to be a distraction. So again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do another meditation practice. I would say that if you want to do other meditation techniques, to do it outside of an Eightfold Path practice and hold in mind that that's what you're doing, that it's something else. That's all.
Right, and that's the way I treat as something else that I do. Just like we're not always on the cushion on here, and we go about our business and anything that helps. One of the things that I learned is biofeedback for anxiety, and there's counting involved. It is a kind of meditation to calm. So that's not to take the place of this kind of meditation, but just as something that is helpful for health, mental health.
I think by all means you should do whatever's helpful, and just be clear that it's very easy for a mind to start adapting, accommodating, and embellishing the Buddha's Dhamma so that it fits something else that really isn't, but so we can call it our spiritual practice. And that's where confusion sets in. And it's just simply from my own experience, not just directly, but teaching. I've seen how easy it is to substitute something else for what it is, especially when it provides a measure of distraction. And the other thing that kind of got me realizing how pure the Buddha's teaching was is he never, he taught for 45 years, and all that time, and he taught hundreds and hundreds of suttas on proper use of meditation and how to do it. He never once wavered from, this is how you meditate. This is what we do. good enough for me.
It seems like such a natural human instinct to embellish.
It is, because it's
To
a natural
start with
human
something,
instinct to ignore ignorance.
and then
Yeah.
that's not enough. We have
Yeah.
to do more and more. So I don't think it's a good thing. It's sort of like acquiring stuff. It's never enough.
Never
It's
enough.
There's no end to it. So don't begin. All these different kinds of Buddhism have just gone in every kind of direction with all kinds of things that the Buddha didn't teach. To infinite degrees.
Yeah.
And that's human nature. It seems like that's human nature.
It is. Again, the Buddha spent as much time teaching what his Dhamma is as he taught that it isn't. I follow that because I think it's important, because it's so easy to fall into other things, especially today. And I've never, it may be possible, but I've never met anybody who did this modern Buddhism by common agreement and never really developed anything except, a conglomeration practice. But Buddhism by common agreement is something the Buddha said don't do, except because common agreement, you're agreeing with other minds that are rooted in ignorance about what this should be, when it has nothing to do with what it is.
John?
Yes, Jen.
Just to kind of address the conversation and the questions, I was thinking about like right effort and right mindfulness, and how that not mindfulness, right livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of addresses something about taking care of the physical body, or isn't there something in there about like needing, doing what you have to do to support your mindfulness with your physical eating? So I think, that broad reference to addressing physical needs is a way of saying, do what you need to do to physically be able to support your concentration. But I'm not going to tell you what that is, because you have a different body than, your physical body may be different than some other physical body. Why should I be telling you what your physical body needs?
Yeah.
And then as you address those physical needs, make sure you're not also identifying with your physical body.
Exactly. That's the most important part of it. And again, I think as a human being that has awakened will naturally take pretty good care of themselves, because they understand what they're taking care of finally. There's none of that underlying self-loathing either. So, the fact that the Buddha didn't say, you should eat these kind of foods, and it's such a big misunderstanding. He was a vegetarian, he never was. Is the same reason why I didn't say, on the 31st of every month you have to deposit so much money for your mortgage.
Right.
He assumes that you'll do it, or this Friday night there's going to be some really good chariot races. Everybody heard about it. There's no reason to talk about these things. What he taught was a single and simple direct method to reclaim our minds, to learn how to think what we want to think when we want to think it. And he taught the most effective way of doing that is to incorporate his Dhamma and recognize and abandon other things that would just be a distraction. So thank you for bringing it up. Becky, good to see you.
Thank you, John. Really good to be here. I just have to agree with everyone else that it's very helpful for me to revisit the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. And it's very simple, but very difficult. Its simplicity is elegant, so elegant.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's very easy to get lost in trying to do it. And what I've really realized from the last few classes we've had on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness is that, and what I'm so thankful for, is that we have a meditation method, and all we have to do is do it. All we have to do is do it. And it's very simple because we've all experienced on our cushions getting lost in our thoughts and bringing our mindfulness back to our breathing. And that's really all we have to do.
That's it.
That's all we have to do.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful to know that that's really all we have to do. And if we just do that with, with right effort, that everything else will start to follow, and it will happen. We will have a calm and peaceful mind. We will be able to say what we want to say when we want to say it. And that is just such a refuge to know that if you just have right effort and you do this, you don't have to beat yourself up throughout the day because you can't concentrate when you're brushing your teeth.
Yeah. Just
keep doing it. And whatever, I don't know any other meditation method. I never learned anything.
Good for you.
Else. But what I have to say is I really feel that if you continue to do this and you do develop a calm and peaceful mind, you will automatically, you will take care of your body.
Yeah.
You will eat the right foods. It will just be something that you do.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. It's great.
Yeah,
Thank you,
it
John.
is. Thank you, Becky, for those words. Sandy, welcome back to our sangha. It's good to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for your wonderful, clear talk today. I guess I just have a little practical question.
Sure.
So during meditation, placing my attention on arising and passing of my breath, and sometimes a pleasant bodily feeling will happen. So what should I do then? Just acknowledge it and go back to my breath?
Yep.
And even though it's always there in the background?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
It's such a great question and a fundamental question. Yes, come back to the sensation of breathing, because during meditation, and again, why it's so important to understand why the Buddha taught this. During shamatha vipassana meditation, I'm here to deepen my concentration, not to examine feelings, not to even do any more than just acknowledge that this is pleasant. Come back to the sensation of breathing.
So I shouldn't go anywhere near, how is this pleasant feeling conditioning my mind? Just acknowledge it's there.
Yes, in fact, it will condition your mind if you start doing anything beyond that point. That's the essence of conditioning your mind, isn't it? By putting things on it, conditioning it. So noticing whatever arises, and that this whole beginning part of the Satipatthana Sutta teaches just that. When I find a pleasant feeling, what do? What did Buddha say to do? Come back to my breath. When I find myself in a wonderful thought, I think I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow. Come back to the sensation of breathing. Or I won the lottery yesterday, what am I going to do with all that money? Come back to the sensation of breathing. It doesn't matter. When I think about an issue that I have at work tomorrow, obviously meditation is not the time to figure that out, is it? It's time to concentrate. Let me come back to the sensation of breathing. And then off my cushion, I'll be better able to understand the ever-changing nature of my thoughts and my feelings and not be distracted by them off my cushion. So even off your cushion, that feeling of, boy, this is such a pleasant feeling now. Where did it come from? Or is it part of this room? Or is it because the cat's here, the dog's here, or I just got off the phone with it's just a pleasant abiding. And when your mind is agitated, it's just an agitated abiding. Did I answer your question? Yeah. So it's just that simple. Our minds want it to be much more. Our minds, I know mine did, I think everybody ever taught, reacts to that initial resistance to start playing around with my feelings and my thoughts and do more with and simply just recognize them. Why? Because it's my thought. It's got to be something special in here because I thought it. It's just a thought.
I guess I would go back to like the initial thought that the Buddha had when he was under the rose apple tree, you know, and he realized that that was a pure abiding when he had a pleasant thought.
Or pleasant feeling
that was, you know, and should I dwell there?
So in this, there's a section on the website, I think it says right meditation, samadhi, and jhana. There's 7 or 8 articles specifically on the Buddha teaching jhana. So the first level of jhana is that the pleasure born of seclusion, but it's still directed thinking. The second level of jhana is recognizing the pleasure born of deepening concentration. Again, we've all done that, right?
I guess that's for what I'm thinking.
So the third level of jhana is that type of directed and evaluating thought, placing a value on something, falls away. And in the moment, there's a pleasant abiding. There's a level of equanimity, the third level of jhana. So you've gone past that idea of evaluating or labeling anything, including a feeling, and there's now just this pleasant abiding. The quality of mind is called equanimity. It means that nothing needs to be any different than it is. Then the fourth level of jhana is a mind that is resting in that equanimity.
I think I kind of go to that place a lot.
I think you do.
Like right there.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, now what do I do from there?
So in one of the suttas, I think it's the last one in the series, it might be called the Anupada, I can't remember it, but it's where the Buddha is using Sariputta as an example of right meditation practice. Sariputta was someone who came to the Buddha and within 2 weeks learned the Dhamma and awakened using these methods. And he was instrumental throughout the Buddha's teaching career. They do. So in the sutta, the Buddha teaches how Sariputta entered the first jhana and understood he was there, and knew that there was deepening levels of concentration, came to the second level, the third level, and then the fourth level. And still, the Buddha's words were, and Sariputta knew there was deeper levels of jhana, even past that. The Buddha only teaches 4 levels of jhana. Again, not that we should achieve these things, but simply to describe an ever deepening concentration practice. So what do you do when you find yourself in that 4th jhana of equanimity? Come back to the sensation of breathing. There's ever deepening levels of concentration, and they're all characterized ultimately by that 4th level. I got a question a few years ago from an online student. They said, well, why did the Buddha keep meditating after he awakened? And at first I had to think about it because I was never asked that question. Why wouldn't he?
I guess once I get to that level, I feel like, okay, now I have one pointed concentration. I should now be like going into like a vipassana, or like there should be something different should be happening.
Yeah, the Buddha taught meditation to support the integration of the Eightfold Path. And so I would say, if you don't feel like you fully integrated the Eightfold Path, put your attention there. And beyond that, enjoy the benefits of a well-concentrated mind that you've developed. That's enough. And there's many sutras, including a few on jhana, where the Buddha teaches you get to this place of awakening, recognize it, and understand there's nothing beyond this, meaning there's nothing worth grasping after. Because the essence of an awakened mind is a mind that is not grasping after anything, including what's next in the Dhamma practice. So the Buddha, and I think you know this, the Buddha never taught insight meditation the way it's taught today, and you know the history of that, correct? So it has nothing to do, or very little to do with a teaching of an awakened human being. And my direct understanding of that, I've been on a couple of retreats, is that it really has nothing at all to do with what the Buddha taught, except the form that you use. So as far as recognizing you've achieved a level of concentration, continue to deepen that concentration. And that supports the Eightfold Path. So I hope I answered your question. Okay, good. Thank you, Sandy. It's good to see you.
I should just stop grasping after what's the next thing I should do.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if the way you said it, if I could teach one thing, it would be that, to stop, especially in Dhamma practice, to stop grasping after something else. This is it. This is what an awakened human being taught, and it's complete, and it's enough. You know, an ego self doesn't ever want to hear it's enough, because it always wants more. If this is enough, the rest of my life is going to stink, isn't it? The rest of my life is going to be wonderful, because thank you for bringing that up, Sandy. Maura, good to see you. I'm sorry we're going on a little bit late, but
and you still got me to talk.
what did I think of it then?
Well, bearing that all in mind, and I will try to be succinct. I had about 3 different trains of thought. One that ties Anthony and Sandy's together in my experience too is because I, for a long time, was really trying to manage my body in meditation. And it was, there's a level of dissatisfaction that comes with that. And there's also, I couldn't see it really, but there's a real self that's there, that's doing. So that when I'm in a couple of things. So when I realize that attention is finite, and I can either place my attention, like it's really, really important where I direct my attention. That began to like make a big difference. So with all these thoughts that come up, like we're all saying, yes, it's human nature. This is the best thought I ever had. Follow me. Now this is the one that's going to take you to completion. When I'm doing, when I'm brushing my teeth, it's boredom. It's the we are so conditioned to needing something. If this isn't going to satisfy me, I come into a room and I go, these guys, I don't know, they're not going to satisfy me, or whatever. So it's this self that is constantly seeking something to give it, right? As you well articulated so beautifully, it needs to establish itself somewhere. And it really doesn't like the feeling that it doesn't get to be entertained. So once we really begin to really, or like my experience is like that, I heard that a million times, but there wasn't a suitable replacement for it. When I finally really got that attention is finite, and I have an ability to direct it towards what is truly satisfying and beneficial, it became like my whole, like the meditation practice and mindfulness throughout the day in framed by the Eightfold Path really took some, I don't know, to pick up steam, for lack of a better word. And as people have alluded to, restraint was a natural result. Because I restrained it intentionally because it's finite, like where we're going to place it. Concentration develops. And then it's very clear to see that which creates dukkha. So I was talking to you the other day on the phone about this, that like the things that I used to go after for distraction are repulsive now. I can see one hair out of place, and that doesn't mean that I don't always follow it 100%, but one hair out of place is going to take me in a route that is going to create more dissatisfaction, and I don't want that. So it occurs naturally. We don't have control over much of things, but there are things that I do have control over, and so that's kind of what I would say. And that with Sandy's comment that when I can feel it inside meditation, this still seeking, this self that wants something more, like remembering, like go back to the breathing, it just deconditions, it's uprooting those roots that are clinging and craving for something different. And then naturally equanimity arises. but it's in that process of surrendering, of seeing, feeling of attention that's arising, because there's a self in there that wants something, wants to be acknowledged. And I'm like, go back to the breath. And so again, like, kind of rereading this material, and I reread The Truth of Happiness, and it's so simple. And Sandy and I were talking about this on the way up, but again, it's got those 4 levels. And yeah, we see them. There's a lot of insight there because we can pull apart what's happening, our experience, and return back. So wisdom is building, and we're building a real home to abide in. Right? It doesn't really feel the need to go out, which is deeply satisfying.
It is. Thank you. Kevin, good to see you.
Thank you for this teaching. It is really fundamental, and it's, I would just echo what I've been hearing here too, because you can see how the teaching has triggered something in everyone who spoke so far. And I don't know if I have much to add. I think, if Buddha taught the heartwood is the Eightfold Path, and it does seem that mindfulness is really the heart of the heartwood. It's a very deep part of the heartwood. Developing concentration, and then shoulder roots.
You said a lot, Kevin. It is. It's all that, resting in a right meditation or a concentration practice. Thank you, Jay. Good to see you.
Thanks. Good to be here. Good to see everybody. I don't have much to add in particular, but I guess I've been reading a book here recently that talks about how you can use your mind to change your body, how you can use it to change your thoughts. And the fellow refers to the gray matter, the brain itself as the mind is sort of being the program, and where the body is the computer itself. So it's kind of, you can't really separate mind and body. They're always working in the same, you can try, and I think people are enchanted by the prospect, but I don't think you can change them. And if you got a good software and you can change it every now and then, you get a thing from Windows saying that they're updating, to this version. You don't know why, you don't know what the hell they're doing, but I guess if we go to a course like this, we're upgrading our software in a way.
It's a good way to look at it.
It's just another
Siddhartha as a software engineer.
As long as we don't get hooked in the whole idea that we always need to be upgrading, because
It's a little too self-referential.
I don't know that.
When's my next update coming?
That's a real
Mary, good to see
example
you.
of nothing's permanent.
I always get so much kind of going over these things again. I mean, this is probably the 3rd time I've been through the Truth and Happiness course, and it's easy to settle back down into your old ways, and you need a shot in the arm to bring you back to the straight and narrow, and back to concentration is what it's all about. Keep moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. This is the 3rd or 4th time through the book for most of us, and I think those of you that have been through it a few times would say that every time you go through it, you see something that was never there before. It's just that, that's how the Buddha taught. He taught everything in that context of dependent origination and 4 noble truths, so that we learn what refined mindfulness is. That, I use that term so we know to say that we hold in mind specific things, but we're also aware of what not to hold in mind. It's the essence of what the Buddha teaches. A mind that is rooted in ignorance is grasping after everything, so it wants a Dharma practice to include everything that it can think of. That was common during the Buddhist time too. That's why he taught the way he taught. And so we learned today, took 2 weeks to get through it, the beginning of a right meditation practice. And it's simply to be dispassionately mindful of feelings and thoughts arising and passing away, in coming back to that first foundation of mindfulness. So we're going to continue this on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. You could read it again, listen to some of the talks, but I think we'll finish this next week. Tuesday, we lost Tuesday's class, so we're kind of a week behind. You're going to get a lot of this. But I think we'll probably catch up. The retreat registration is up. The dates are May 16th to 19th. If you're going, please sign up as soon as you can. It helps me a lot with my logistics and my financial responsibilities with Juan, but this is going to be another wonderful retreat. So, all right, we'll finish with metta as we always do. So again, find your relaxed meditation posture. And one more thing, it's gotten late again. I am mindful of not going too late with these, but just so you know, I am mindful of it, but maybe not as well concentrated as I should be. This was a great class this morning. So again, just become mindful of your the sensation of breathing in your body, your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class this morning. Peace. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, John.
See you soon.
Yep.